Welcome to the Modernize or Die podcast, CFML News Edition, where we keep you up to date with everything going on in the Cold Fusion community. We'll share the latest news on events, releases to engines, frameworks, libraries, and tools, as well as spotlighting quality content from the community. Welcome to the Modernize or Die podcast, CFML News Edition. It's February 9th, 2021. I'm Gavin Pickin, software consultant with Ortus Solutions, and I'm joined by Eric today.
Hey, Gavin, glad to be here.
Good to see you, bud. Well, I'm rocking out my Hacktoberfest shirt today. Just got it in the mail, so that's why I'm not wearing the polo, but pretty cool. These get brighter every year, I swear.
Gotta love it.
Yep, for sure. Well, why don't we start off by thanking our sponsors?
Yeah, we want to thank our sponsor, Ortus Solutions. Ortus Solutions, one way to give back to them is to support CFCasts, which is our premier video training site, releasing new content every week. And we'd also like to thank our Patreon supporters. We currently have 33 Patreons, providing 61% of the funding for this podcast. You can learn more at patreon.com/Ortus Solutions. And thank you so much for your support.
Yeah, and last week we had Luis on the show, and he actually mentioned a few new incentives for those Patreon supporters. So I know that the marketing team is working on getting the Patreon page updated and the Ortus site. So we'll remind you of those at the end of the show too, just in case you didn't hear them. But yeah, so thank you to everyone making this podcast possible and helping us with our open source initiatives. Okay, so let's get into some news, and the big thing on our list, John, if you're listening, this is for you. The quick workshop dates have been announced.
Woo! That's right. I'll be leading that workshop. It is going to be March 11th and 12th, a 2-day workshop going over how to get started with Quick, how it can work in your application, the mindset of Quick, and how it can give you some awesome superpowers with your models and your entities.
Cool. I'm going to post the link in the chat for those watching live. And yeah, that's pretty exciting that we got that one scheduled. It's coming up pretty soon. I can't believe it's almost a month away now. So
yep.
Yeah, cool. So John, when you listen, that's where you get it. We'll have more information on the website soon too, but yeah, you can always reach out and ask Eric more. I know we have do you have an outline for that coming soon as well? They'll have on the site?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, it's with our marketing team. So I believe actually it's on the Eventbrite page as well. Yeah. Oh,
cool.
You can go there. You can see what we're going to cover, some of the prerequisites.
Perfect.
So it's going to be great.
Okay, sounds good. Next up, we also have an Ortus webinar this month. So on the 26th of February, 11 a.m. Central Time, Jon Clausen is going to be taking you through one of our newer products, Stachebox. So take control of logging and error handling with Stachebox. And cool thing about this, unlike everything else, it's powered by Elasticsearch. So that's the big difference in this one over some of the other error handling and logging tools that we've worked with, and we love Elasticsearch, and this is how John basically powered up his logging. So it's should be a fun one. I've seen that some of the little samples and demos he's done for Ortus, and it's pretty neat. So I'm looking forward to seeing this.
The other amazing thing about Stachebox is the logo. And I'm going to find it and put it in the show notes. But it is based on Logstash, but the logo is about the other stash, and it's amazing.
Cool. Okay. We also have an Adobe webinar coming up here. It's going to be on February 24th at 8 a.m. Pacific time, and that's going to be the one called SQL I Know Enough to Break Everything. So that sounds like a Dave Ferguson one, if I'm not mistaken. The website does not have the speaker on there, but I assume that's Dave. I've seen this session before, and it's a great session. So if you've written SQL in any way, shape, or form, you've probably done some scary things with it and made some mistakes, and Dave knows enough to break everything. And so he shares a few stories and a few hints on how not to do that. So So yeah, but that's basically the webinar. The link here is going to be. You already shared it? Eric's on top of it here, so it's in the show notes. But yeah, I can. If you want to find out more about the webinars and events, they have it on the coldfusion.adobe.com portal. So that's where I found that one. So register for that one. If you haven't seen it, it's a great session. So definitely cool.
Last up, we wanted to highlight something posted on our Ortus community from Mr. John Farrar. He is doing a Docker meeting for the Mid Michigan ColdFusion user group. So we'll paste a link to that on the community site, and you can check out that meetup as well.
Yep. So here it is.
Do we know the date for that?
No, I didn't see that yet. So hopefully John will be posting this shortly. So sign up to the portal and follow this thread, and you should get updates as he posts that out. Mid Michigan usually posts on the Facebook group, I believe. So Rick Mason is the one in charge of that. So yeah, we'll give you more information, but just wanted to show you guys that yeah, people are in the Ortus community using it, and it's great to see. And yeah.
Real-time follow-up, John is in the chat. He says it is next Tuesday, likely at 7 p.m. Eastern. So
there we go. Cool.
Keep an eye on that thread so you can get links and everything. And yeah, we're looking forward to it. Thanks for posting in the Ortus community.
Cool. So I'll update that as we go in the show notes. That way it's there for everyone watching or listening later. Okay. Next up, we just have a reminder that Luis's book is coming very soon. 102 ColdBox MVC quick tips and tricks. We talked to him last week about quite a bit, so if you want to catch last week's episode 89, you can find out more about that book and how it came together. So next up, we have some information on CFCasts. So you want to give us a little CFcast update there?
Yeah, we have new videos that have come out this week in the What's New with ColdBox 6 series and the Command Box Zero to Hero series. So both of those are available on CFcast. You can go subscribe today and watch. I think there's 7 new videos, so lots of content coming out.
Yep, and I think there's a more Command Box workshop videos coming out this week as well, so keep an eye out on that.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. So next up, we have some more conferences and training. And so coming up next week, we have the Devolution from DevNexus, the virtual conference, free and online at devnexus.com. And I'll share my screen for those watching. So a lot of great stuff, a lot of great speakers in here. Some pretty big names too in the Java world. Everything JVM related, you can pretty much find at this conference here. So I don't even live in the JVM world that much, to be honest, and I recognize a few of these names. So some big ones. So yeah, definitely check that out. It's a great free conference, and even if you don't play in the JVM, deep in the JVM very often, there's still some good content there. There's some Docker stuff as well, and a few things that apply across the board. So. We also have a new one posted and shared by Charlie Earhart, Redis Conf 2021. So there's actually a call for speakers that ends this week too. So if you guys are wanting to do a Redis talk, maybe we should get a few Redis talks out there now that we have Redis support in Adobe ColdFusion, and then we have the Redis extension too for Lucy, right, from Ortus.
Yes.
So there's a link there to actually sign up for a call for speakers. So if you want to fill out the form, you can do that here. And basically it's a nice little conference, just a one-day conference, but Redis is pretty neat. So it's a lot of good content, and yeah. So it looks like the conference again is in April. So you got one more week if you want to get a session in. And obviously once the session's in, we'll have more information on who's speaking and what they're speaking about and all that great stuff. Cool. So just a reminder, we mentioned at the start of the show, John, if you missed it, the quick dates have been released, March 11th and 12th, and you can register now on Eventbrite. And then we have more workshops coming. We got Command Box Zero to Hero, ColdBox Zero to Hero, ColdBox Hero to Superhero. Dates will be released as we make them. And then We also have ITB being planned for September and ITB Latam planned for December this year. So we'll give you more information as we get that going forward. Okay, so quick one today. Let's get into some blogs and tweets and videos because we got a few of those today.
Yeah. We have a few from Mr. Ben Nadal. The first one about follow-up to using ColdFusion custom tags to create an HTML email DSL in Lucy. This was a great use case, for ColdFusion being a very tag-based language and HTML emails being horrible.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different libraries like this out there, and I think it's a great opportunity to look at these custom tags. I'll be honest, I don't usually use custom tags in ColdFusion.
But this is, like I said last week, this is one of the great use cases for it that actually makes sense.
Yeah.
And so the cool thing is about this one is Ben actually, excuse me, shared his repo here, so you can actually get all the files too. And the good thing about the blog post is he's saying that it's basically at a proof of concept level now. So it's kind of neat.
Yeah, and for those of you who maybe are wondering why you'd need a custom library for HTML emails, email clients notoriously do not render HTML like as well as browsers, and they take all sorts of different tricks and very specific syntax. And so what Ben's doing here, if you dive into the source, is encapsulating all that craziness into these new custom tags, so you don't have to remember that each time. I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, basically the big thing with email is you have to inline style all your stuff, and so it's going to be really messy doing that. So using the tags allows you to do that on the fly, and I think he's even using some JSoup in there. But he's doing some pretty cool things. And then he's using the CF import to import groups of tags together, so you have the little namespace, and it's pretty cool. So yeah, he did a good job, and this one just goes in a little more detail. He did have some other ones last week, but yeah. So if you're doing email stuff, check out the other blog post too. It has links to, I think it was Lucid for, or maybe there's a couple other tools he mentions for testing your emails, which is life-saving. So, yeah.
Yeah. He mentions at the end a different template library called MJML, which does a lot of things with responsive layout. We've actually used that at Ortus, and it's really nice. It really looks like this custom tag stuff, though, right? It's just if you've done React components, Vue components, custom tags, all of those kind of look the same. I think the nice thing about this is it doesn't have to be compiled like beforehand. All the MJML stuff we're like throwing through Webpack and stuff. So it's kind of nice to have the rapid development that we're used to in ColdFusion. So
yeah, and I think someone on Twitter was saying how they were doing some CF wrapper versions of the MJML as well. So lots of cool stuff going on out there. So I think if you look at Ben on Twitter, you can see the response. I think it was James Moberg. He has a lot to say on all the little cool tools he builds and stuff. So possibly one of his. Okay. Now next one is from Ben, but this is part of the process of removing implicit variable access at scale in Lucy. So I'm sure this one has lots of controversy around it. But for those of you who don't know what implicit variable access is, it's basically talking about how if it's unscoped variable, that basically it'll walk up the scopes trying to find where it's at, etc. And so what you can actually do is you can disable it. And a lot of people are saying that if you have unscoped variable that's super slow, and a lot of other people will say, well, it depends. Have you tested it? And that's always a good answer to that. Slower. But anyway, so he looked at this, and basically because of the way he's using these email custom tags and the amount of high repetitive volume, as he puts it, he said that it basically did make a meaningful difference. Not everybody will see that, but in this case, he did see, a pretty big difference. And so he looked at going through and using debugging information to try and figure out, implicit variable accesses and how many there were and how long it took, etc. So this was sort of the process of him, using that information and then basically getting it down from over a second up in one set to 34 milliseconds, which is a pretty big difference. Um, so, and I like the motto here. So no matter what you're doing, first make it work, then make it right, and then make it fast. So worry about speed at the end. If it's not working, it doesn't really matter how fast it is. But yeah, so it was kind of interesting because I know that there's a lot of arguments about some of this stuff, and people complain about speed all the time. But a lot of times when you test it, like even if you scope everything, it doesn't make much of a difference a lot of the time. So
Yeah, I have thoughts about it. I think it's good to know how to throw this debugger in to see when it actually matters. I'm sad that it does matter. Like at one point he mentions that he refactored an each loop to a for loop. So because you can't use the argument scope inside the closure, because that now refers to the closure's arguments. And it's things like that that I shouldn't have to care about that. Like Lucy shouldn't penalize me for using functional programming over for loops. It just makes me sad. I know I've had people open issues on some of our repos like QB, which uses callbacks and closures a lot, and they'll have run this debugging and say, hey, look, you have all these unscoped things and it's all inside closures. And I shouldn't have to worry about that. Lucy, please make it so I don't have to worry about that.
yeah,
So
yeah, it's kind of a tough one. So, but again, test it. You either use debugging information like this, or maybe use Fusion Reactor to really get some stats and numbers on it, and and test it properly and see if it's worth it. Because I know we've done a lot of work with ColdBox over time and done all this work, and really the difference in speed is, almost not noticeable sometimes. So just one of those things.
yeah,
So.
like you mentioned, you really have to be doing the same scope lookup thousands of times for it to start to slow down your code. So
Yeah, and that's one of the things with
especially because
ColdBox.
with the order, like you're going, what is it, local arguments, variables, then like form URL. So like if you're in local or arguments, you're not saving a ton of time by skipping that one step.
Yeah,
And I would argue if you're relying on scope lookup to go all the way to form or URL, you might find some other problems in your code.
yeah, exactly. And I know a lot of people will basically, if it's not local or arguments, they'll use it. Maybe some rule like that, and that makes
Yeah.
sense. I know I got bitten before. I had some old code and we switched versions a long time ago, but they changed the order of the lookups, and that bit me. And I
Oh,
think when they went from like CF8 to CF9 a long time ago, like I said. But yeah, they changed the order of the lookups, and all my code started freaking out. I can't remember what
so
it was, but it was some lookup order change missed me. So from then I've started using it very adamantly. So
I'd be very interested now that I'm looking through more of Ben's post if the speed increase came from adding the arguments prefix or simply not using an each loop. If something with that with Lucy, but
yeah, maybe. Yeah,
I'll have to dig in, see if he put all his examples up there to dig into. So
yeah. That's the
anyway,
thing, is it's hard to know what really makes a difference, especially at small scale.
yeah.
Yep. Okay. Well, we also have a video, a little live stream from Matthew Clemente. So he's been working on this Prism.js stuff for a while now. And so he's been working on this language definition. And so he actually gets into how to test that, which is pretty neat. So it has its own little syntax highlighting test. So I thought that was pretty neat. So he goes through this, and yeah, I'm blown away by the time, but also the things people are playing with these days when they're doing this. So I really appreciate you sharing this, Matthew. It's pretty neat.
I'm so excited for this to be done and replace all the syntax highlighting things that we use with it, because there are not a lot of great choices for CFML.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see.
Okay.
Okay.
There's a podcast out this week, the Working Code Podcast, episode 8,
Yep.
about their origin stories part 2.
Yep.
Sounds like superheroes.
Yep. So I think the first one they had Carolyn Adams, and then no, I'm confused now. Anyway, they had two in episode 7 and the other two in episode 8. For some reason, I thought it was Ben and Ben and Carol went last week, but maybe I'm confused. So maybe Carol and Adams. Anyway, it's kind of cool to see their superhero backstories and origin stories, and find out more about them. And yeah, I mean, I've obviously met all of these guys and girls at conferences, and it's kind of cool to hear more about their background. So it's a good little podcast they've got going there, the Working Code Podcast. So check that out. Next up, we have another one, Ben. Hi, Ben.
Thanks for giving us some blog posts this week.
That's why Ben started his own podcast, because he was talking about himself all day long on our podcast. He's like, start my own.
This one is about, it's titled "Enterprise is Not a Dirty Word," and just talking about how sometimes just talking about enterprise software or working on it, I often hear it just called legacy. Like anything big is now legacy.
Yeah.
And just how, like, it doesn't have to have the negative connotation it has.
Yeah.
Right? Because that software is delivering a lot of value to a lot of people.
Yeah, and I like the way he says it too, that basically enterprise developers err on the side of robust, dependable, battle-tested technologies, because they have to, they have to work. They have to be solid. The enterprise has an enterprise price tag for a reason. Things need to work. They have to be well supported. And so, yeah, usually they're a little more, slow to evolve, and they're not the new shiny silver, thing that we're all chasing. But whatever they're using, it's because it was, a solid battle-tested technology that they could rely on for years to come. So.
Yeah, I think one thing that gives enterprise software a bad rep that Ben brings up in this article is that it's very long-lived, and the average web developer is not at a company that long, right? And so there's nobody that knows the whole system because everyone's moving around, and the system is very specific to the customer it was built for. It's not a general purpose system. It's made to do very specific things. So it is weird, and it does have things that don't make sense to somebody coming in, and it maybe isn't as elegant, but it's delivering awesome value to that customer. So
yeah, the average tenure for web developer at a given job is 2 years. That's crazy.
I believe it.
Well, I know a lot of people are jumping jobs every 6 months or a year just to get that salary jump, because it's way easier to get a salary bump changing jobs. But I mean, in the States, I've worked here, and I worked for 8 years for one company, 8 years for another company. I'm like 5.5 years into Ortus, so I'm not one of those people. I'm not a jumper. Probably safer for everybody. So. Okay, so next up we have one from Will DeBruin, and Will's a ColdBox user, but one thing I like about Will is he's not shy, and he's willing to, do things his way. And so, in this one here is another perfect example. Problem details for HTTP APIs. So in this blog post, he talks about modifying your ColdBox REST response handler. And so ColdBox had a base handler response for RESTful service for many years, and we kind of had it as a module, but then we made it more of a template, and so that way you could customize it, because really these things you kind of customize and evolve over time. And so one of the cool things about it was that it wrapped everything up and did a lot of the basic stuff that you needed, error handling and everything else, and it did a really good job of it. And the response object that we used basically looked like what you see here. Those who are watching, we have a data key, an error key, and a messages array key. And then we added pagination recently because we started doing lots of pagination with all our APIs, and so this is sort of how it usually looks. But if you don't like that format, like Will, you can change it up. So it's pretty neat. Do you want to tell them how he went about overriding the ColdBox defaults?
Yeah, I think he mentions that you use a preprocess interceptor and set the response object to what you create. And yeah, I think what I thought was most interesting about this is he wanted a different response for errors for his REST handler. And I guess there's an RFC for that. Well, there's probably an RFC for everything. But that's what he was doing here. He's conforming to RFC 7807, which
Oh.
defines all the stuff that you can see in here. So, I mean, that's cool. I've never heard of anybody else using that, so it's probably not a very commonly adhered to RFC, but still cool.
Well, that was a funny thing. One thing I liked about the response handler we're using is that it's not magically different when you get into success versus an error. It's the same keys, just different information in them, and you can reuse the keys as needed. But I guess, yeah, if there's an RFC, and it makes sense to conform to that. And if they're already doing that already, why not do that again? Keep that going. And
Yeah.
so Will's made his own one, and it's kind of neat.
Yeah.
And he says it's not a very
I like
popular RFC, probably.
But at least it's some kind of standard. Yep.
Yep.
So we don't care. Doesn't matter what standard you have, just pick one.
Yeah, as long as you. Yeah. I had a conversation with a client the other day where we were talking about standards instead of like one of these companies that they work with. Everyone has all these different standards, and so they made a new standard that'll accept all the standards. So we're like, how is that working if you're making more standards to basically accept new standards when you're using a standard was to bring everyone together? So that's just kind of contradictory. So let's make more standards to accept more standards.
I am now contractually obliged to include the XKCD comic for that, so we'll throw that in the show notes.
Okay, for those who are watching, I will share that really quickly as well. Situation, there are 14 competing standards. 14? Ridiculous. We need to develop one universal standard that covers everyone's use case. Yeah, now there's 15 competing standards. Exactly. Okay, well, short and sweet little selection of blogs there, but we have a find a job section here, and this section is actually not so short and sweet this week.
Right, I think there's 12 new jobs this week,
and there may be some cross-posting as well, because I have noticed a couple of them are similar. You'll see the Canberra, several Canberra ones. So I've noticed lately there's been a couple of double-ups.
They all look to be full-time positions. We have a remote position in the United States. We have one in, Ahmedabad, India. Some in Australia. There's a senior application developer in the UK. And another one in Maharashtra, India. So all over the world, 12 new jobs. So pretty awesome.
Yep. So lots of good content. Obviously, click on them and find out a little more about it. You can get them at getcfmljobs.com. And yeah, over 40 Cold Fusion positions, I think, since start of December now. So lots of things coming out. You can post jobs here if you guys are looking for a job. And it does scrape things like Indeed and some of those other places. And that's why we get double up sometimes if you're posting the job at different places. But yeah, and you can obviously sort by some countries and types as well. Again, nice little Cold Fusion app, free for the community. So cool to see that being used. Okay. So next up, we have our ForgeBox module of the week. So we have a barcode generator by Alan Quinlan. And
Alan's one of our own here at Ortus.
Yep.
And he's made a... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, he responded to the job posting that we had for several weeks late last year, and he's one of the developers we picked up. So this is one of the modules he created.
Yeah, this is a great way to create a barcode. You can either get an image object back or write it to a disk. At some point in your career, you'll need a barcode for something. So handles a lot of the common formats. I know this Code 128, QR codes are the UPCs. Those are the ones I know I've used. So looks like a handy little library.
Yep, very cool. Okay. Next up, our VS Code hint, tip, and trick of the week. is a video about hints and tips and tricks.
So this was from the VS Code Day that was recorded. And so this is how some tips and tricks how to be productive. So this is like a fire hose of tips and tricks compared to what you get from us, our
Yep.
one a week.
Yeah, and this is from one of the core members on the team, I believe, too. So they must know what they're talking about, right? So
We hope.
yeah, we hope. So it's up on YouTube. It's just a 30-minute little video here, but definitely check this out. You can find it on the Microsoft Learn site. All the VS Code Day videos were posted there, but they're not as easy to find as this link. So when I found this on Twitter, I thought I'd snatch that and share that with you guys. So yeah, lots of little tips and tricks, little shortcuts using command palette and everything else as well. But very cool little video, and hopefully you guys will be able to be a little more productive. I think we've almost even got Brad using it like 50% of the time now.
We should still trying to pry out Cold Fusion Builder from him.
I think someone needs to write an extension which makes managing your projects easier, because that's his biggest complaint about VS Code is it pops up, new folders for all your little projects instead of having all of them in one big thing. But I think he just doesn't know how to use workspaces.
I was gonna say, yeah, you can create a workspace with all your projects.
Yeah.
VS Code can do whatever you'd like it to do, which is what is great and horrible about it.
Yeah, just like a lot of other stuff.
But I'm glad that somebody like Brad could come over and have all their projects on their sidebar. That would drive me absolutely bonkers. I use my shortcuts and open Windows, and it's nice that this one tool can work for both of us.
Yep, for sure. Okay, well, next up, we have our Patreon supporters. So before we go and thank them all, we want to tell you a little bit more about some of those new perks, basically, for becoming a supporter. So if you go to patreon.com/ordersolutions, you can see the different packages we have. And if you're a Bronze package and up, now you get a ForgeBox Pro and a CFcast subscription as a perk for the Patreon subscription, which is pretty neat. So we're rolling out some new ForgeBox updates, as Luis mentioned last week as well. But yeah, having your own ForgeBox Pro account and then CFcast subscription itself is a pretty nice little perk. Obviously, a lot of good content coming there. Some of it is free, but there's quite a lot of it that's behind that subscription account too. So another cool thing is if you're a Patreon supporter, you have your own profile badge on the community website. So the new Ortus community, we imported all our Patreon supporters and give them their own little tag. And they get private access to their private forum on the community website too. So that's kind of neat. So if you're a Patreon supporter, you can get in there and ask questions, and basically only Patreon supporters can get in there, and Ortus team as well, of course, so we can answer your questions. But it's kind of our own little private club there for all the cool Patreon supporters. So those are some of the things, and like I said, we'll have more information going up on the Patreon site and on the Ortus site as well, but you heard it here first about some of these perks. So if you're a Patreon supporter and you haven't got that email about your CFcast subscription, let us know. We can get that taken care of for you. Oh, sorry, if you're a Bronze package up.
A bronze.
Yes,
yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Almost missed that one. So... But yeah, I know some people were sort of split between Patreon and CFcast, so trying to make it easy for everybody. But yeah, you want to go ahead and read off the names of these wonderful people that are paying their hard-earned money to support us?
I'd love to. Thank you to Don Bellamy, Eric Hoffman, Gary Knight, Giancarlo Gomez, Mario Rodriguez, John Wilson, Joseph Lamery, Ben Nadal, Brett DeLine, Carl von Stetten, Charlie Earhart, Dan Card, Daniel Garcia, David Bellinger, Didier Lesnicki, Edgardo Cabezas, Jan Yannick, Jason Diger, Jeff McLean, Jeremy Adams, Jonas Erickson, Jordan Clark, Kai Koenig, Laxma Titrahadi, Leon Saramelis, Matthew Darby, Matthew Clemente, Mingo Hagen, Patrick Flynn, Ross Phillips, Scott Steinbeck, Yogesh Mathur, and Stephen Klotz. Thank you for supporting Ortus Solutions, this podcast, all our open source projects. Thank you so much.
Yep. And in the chat, John made a note that he said there was another VS Code Day today, But I think it was actually a release party. So they have release parties every month when they do their releases. So they have a little live video with a team for, I think it's a live stream for about an hour. So if you follow them on Twitter, you guys can check out when they are as well. And if we get them in time, I will try and announce them on the podcast. But usually they announce them a few days before, and by that time it's already too late. So, but yeah, just wanted to make sure we didn't miss that as well. So. Yeah, short and sweet this week. Some good content. Lots of good stuff coming up. But yeah, thanks everybody for joining us, and thanks Eric for joining me.
Yeah, we'll catch you guys later.
Have a good one, everybody. Bye. Show notes for this episode can be found at cfmlnews.modernizeordie.io, where you can also subscribe to your favorite podcast player like Spotify or iTunes. We also have the link to YouTube to find more videos just like this. The music used in this podcast is under a royalty-free license from Sound.com and Blue Tree Audio.